This video is on Empire of Ash, the upcoming Doom of Valyria prequel TV series to Game of Thrones. It is the conclusion to about 8 hours worth of faction profile videos I made, revealing massive leak information I was given about this prequel. That originally it was the coda to one of my much longer videos, over an hour long, and then I realized it made more sense to split it off so when it's shorter it gives more focus to it as the conclusion. So a brief overview again to sum up the three major factions in the story. You have the Sphinxes, who descend from the original Valyrian aristocracy. They're the upper aristocracy, descended from the original nobles and priests when they were humble shepherds, who somehow learned how to tame dragons. The blue blood nobility. And opposing them you have the so-called young dragons, who are the younger aristocracy. They descend from common soldiers who became powerful warlords during Valyria's wars of conquest, growing rich from plunder and slaves. They're explicitly called new men, which is a term from Latin, novus homo, that clearly these two factions are based on the factions in the civil wars that ended the Roman Republic, because Valyria is Rome with dragons. That they're the optimates and the populares, the upper Senate faction and the lower faction of new generals who got wealthy during conquest. So it's based on history, and that's why they're like that. And this isn't any expansionist empire based on conquest. You have the guys who were in charge before and during the conquest, and then all the soldiers and generals who got powerful from all the plunder. And then the third faction are the freeholders, who are not dragon lords. They are rich merchant princes, bankers and magisters, the local elites out in the provinces, below the dragon lords, but above the slaves. They're not dragon lords, that isn't their strategy. It's money as power, bribing people, hiring more armies. They have more resources. Everywhere from Pentos to Slaver's Bay and Marine to Sothorios, their main headquarters and stronghold is in Zamatar on the coast of Sothorios, this major port hub. And because they're from all over half of them aren't white. Some of them are even immigrants from Yiti who live in Zamatar and other cities, that their POV character is an Asian woman. And this also loosely matches what happened in Rome, that just as the civil wars between Marius and Sulla were happening, phase one of the Optimates and Populares fighting each other, you had the social war where the provinces were in revolt at the same time, trying to take advantage of the chaos. And just after I was given this overview of all three of these factions and their characteristics, it's not just, oh yeah, it's another group of nobles, but how they're different from each other and have different governing philosophies towards power, I realized how well they match up to Varyss's riddle about power that he gives Tyrion in A Clash of Kings. The TV series gave a shorter version of it. They almost didn't because they nearly forgot about it, which is embarrassing because George R. R. Martin has said it's one of the two most important quotes in the whole book series, summing up one of the fundamental questions, what is power? The other one was Septon Meribald's speech about how war is devastating, but just why do some people follow the orders of some men and not others? Why are they in power? That there's different approaches to power. That they didn't just make up, oh, there's some cool First Men or Children of the Forest faction. They exemplify, even more than the Dance of the Dragons or Targaryen Conquest, they're like they made archetypes for the three factions in Varyss's riddle. Even though they do match up to what was going on during the fall of the Roman Republic, that they're archetypes for a reason. So I want to read off again Varyss's riddle. May I leave you with a bit of a riddle, Lord Tyrion? In a room sit three great men, a king, a priest, and a rich man with his gold. Between them stands a sellsword, a little man of common birth and no great mind. Each of the great ones bids him to slay the other two. Do it, says the king, for I am your lawful ruler. Do it, says the priest, for I command you in the names of the gods. Do it, says the rich man, and all this gold shall be yours. So tell me, who lives and who dies? Power is a curious thing, my lord. And Tyrion goes, well, all depends on the man with the sword. And yet he is no one, Varyss said. He has neither a crown, nor gold, nor favor of the gods, only a piece of pointed steel. And Tyrion goes, that piece of steel is the power of life and death. Varyss, just so, yet if it is the swordsmen who rule us in truth, why do we pretend our kings hold the power? Why should a strong man with a sword ever obey a child king like Joffrey, or a wine-sodden oaf like his father King Robert? Tyrion, because these child kings and drunken oafs can call other strong men with other swords. Varyss, then these other swordsmen have the true power. Or do they? Whence came their swords? Why do they obey? Varyss smiled. Some say knowledge is power. Some tell us that all power comes from the gods. Others say it derives from law. Yet that day on the steps of Baelor's Sept, our godly High Septon and the lawful Queen Regent, and your ever-so-knowledgeable servant, were as powerless as any cobbler or cooper in the crowd. Who truly killed Eddard Stark, do you think? Joffrey, who gave the command? Sir Ilyn Payne, who actually swung the sword? Or another? Power resides where men believe it resides. No more and no less. Tyrion, so power is a mummer's trick. Varyss, a shadow on the wall. Varyss murmured, yet shadows can kill, and oft-times a very small man can cast a very large shadow. And Martin has talked about this in behind-the-scenes videos, that he's fascinated by just what is power. Why do some people follow men who do things they don't agree with, and why do some of them not do that? There was this one video I can't find easily, I don't think it's online anymore, where he says he's fascinated by the story of a king in ancient times in the Middle East who ordered all his guards to each of them go home and kill your own wives, because he suspected they might be spying. And they went and did it. Each of them, to a man, went and killed their wives, just at his command. And he points out, as Martin saying, why? Because the king has a sword? You have a sword! Rise in rebellion! Why would you blindly obey this? We all have swords. Summing it up, that Martin frequently quotes this, that as William Faulkner said, the only thing worth writing about is the human heart in conflict with itself. How good people sometimes do bad things, and bad people sometimes do good things. Not the battle of good and evil against a dark lord, or the battle between the living and the dead. This is why the Dance of the Dragons is also so interesting, because both sides are very gray, that they're not entirely good or bad, depending on who you root for. But in terms of the nature of power, not just morality, why do some people follow orders they know to be wrong? Why don't some other people, who instead will fight to the death, believing in some of their principles, like law, or honor, or religion? Why do people pick one side or another in a civil war? In a time of conflicting loyalties, do you ultimately side with your family, or the kingdom, or religion, if they're all opposing each other on different sides? So, closing thoughts for you to discuss here are that the three major factions in Empire of Ash really exemplify the three men in Varyss's riddle. One of the central questions in the novels: what is power? And I eagerly exclaimed this to my source, that this isn't something I just picked apart later, that it's so obvious and beautiful that the instant they had finished, I just leapt up and was giddily explaining, wow, this sounds just like Varyss's riddle. These power archetypes that Martin was talking about. And they're archetypes for a reason. These were the three kinds of power in the civil wars that ended Rome. You had the upper aristocrats, the lower ones, the soldiers, the kings, and the rich men. That it isn't just, oh, here's some other local group of squabbling lords in the long night. That no, these are three different philosophies, mentalities to power. Like the best video games are the ones where each faction isn't a carbon copy of the other, but they have entirely different strategies and design philosophies. Just mapping onto this, well, first off, obviously the freeholders very easily match up to the rich man in the riddle. They're the rich men. They're magisters and bankers with money as power. So they're comparable to Littlefinger, Illyrio Mopatis, Tycho Nestoris, and the Iron Bank, and so forth. That lines up directly. The Sphinxes and Young Dragons are a slight, but not that much, reworking of the priest-king dynamic. I'm pretty sure, I hope you agree, I think it's just a small change. The Sphinxes' claim to power is that they're the old aristocracy who dominate by law and magical power, cloaked in religion. So, not that religion dominates politics for them, but just the Sphinxes say law and the power of the gods are on our side. That we dominate Valyria's Senate. They're the dominant faction. They've dominated it for thousands of years, even though the Young Dragons are nipping at their heels. And we're favored of the gods. Religion is on our side, and the system is skewed in our favor, but hey, the system is skewed in the favor of every aristocrat in Westeros. They're not a democracy, from the Lannisters to the Starks. So they're saying, why am I a king? Why am I ruling Valyria's Senate? Well, because it's the law. And I made the law centuries ago, and that puts my descendants in power. The Young Dragons started out as soldiers and warlords who rose to power on plunder, so they have a strong might makes right mentality. These young bucks who are chafing under the rule of the Sphinxes, they're saying their entire philosophy is not high-minded law or religion, it's why should I have power? Because I have a sword. Because I have a dragon. Might makes right, brute force. So that's a little more similar to the king in Varyss' Riddle. There's some slight overlap, you have to rejigger this around, but not that much. The Sphinxes are a little like the priest, but they're not really clergy, and the Young Dragons make no pretense to law. So just, if you took the riddle, kept the rich man, and instead of a king said, well, an army general, instead of a priest said sort of a sorcerer, priest, king, that's what the Sphinxes are, as a faction. The stuffy old aristocracy who say, well, we have the power of our moral superiority because of our religion, because of our ancestry, because law is skewed in our favor, but we do defend the power of the law. They believe in principles and law, that the Young Dragons are just, so what, law is a piece of paper, I'll break it easily. The Sphinxes respect law like the way Stannis does. So, slightly reworking Varyss' Riddle, just rewording it, overlap. This is the closing thought for discussing, it's amazing that these three factions, which aren't just, three more local houses in the Reach, House Butterwell and House Caswell are fighting each other or something, that they're three different cultures with different approaches to power. I'll leave you with this riddle. A common sellsword stands between three great men in Valyria. A sorcerer prince, an army general, and a rich man. Each bids him to kill the other two. The Sphinx says, I'm your lawful ruler with the power of magic and the gods behind me as well. The freeholder says, kill them and I will give you gold. And the Young Dragon says, Wiley here, I have a sword, I have an army. Kill them and I will grant you their gold and honors. I will say it is rightfully yours, after prying it from their dead hands. So, of the three of them, who lives and who dies? And that's what we're going to be exploring for the next 5 to 7 years in Empire of Ash. And it's a journey I hope to make with all of you.